Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing the Booktube Giving Tag. This tag was created by Elliot, who I will link below, and she created this tag to really celebrate the word giving, both positive things as well as negative things, and to highlight giving to charity. So this year she's highlighting a specific charity, the Phoenix Rescue Mission, which has food banks, things like that. All of the information about that charity is linked below, and you can check out her video to find out more about it. And I was tagged by Angela at Literature Science Alliance, who I will also link below along with her video that tagged me. And I was very amused by the way that she tagged me. So I don't do a ton of tags normally, I just don't find the time to film them. But Angela specifically wanted me to do this tag because there's a couple of questions in this that ask for rather negative opinions that you have about things. And when Buddy read a huge collection, an anthology of SFF short stories this year, she got a lot of my spicy takes on things. Often if I finish a story and in the heat of the moment, right after I don't like something, I have quite a few things to say. So she got exposed to a lot of that, and she commented that I don't normally talk about things that I dislike on my channel too much. And that's because normally I've calmed down by the time I film. But I'm gonna go ahead and answer these questions, and for the negative ones, try to give those deep feelings about what I don't like. Question 1, what's a book you would give everyone if you could? So I like the way that Angela gave both a fiction and nonfiction answer for this, so I'm going to as well. For fiction, I would give everyone Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. It is just such an amazing short story collection that is all about the what ifs, looking at so many different situations, imagining a different technology or different future or different past and seeing how that would affect how people live and how people would react. And it is just so well done. I think that a lot of people who maybe don't read a lot of SFF would love this collection because it is a little bit more literary in feel at times. And I think that a lot of people who love SFF don't necessarily read a ton of short stories, and I think this would really expose them to just one of the masters of the short story. So I would definitely love to give this to everybody. I kind of think everybody would love it. It's such a good book. The nonfiction book that I would give everyone is Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. This book is incredibly helpful in thinking about end of life. So Atul Gawande is a doctor, and in this book he talks about really what it's like as people age and how their families need to kind of come to terms with that mortality, and especially in terms of how you take care of your elderly relatives, especially because there's often a push and pull between the independence that the person themselves wants and the desire for safety of this elderly relative that the younger relatives have. Almost all of us are going to have somebody in our lives who gets old and sick and will pass away at some point. And I think that reading this book really helps you think through how you're going to handle that and what you need to keep in mind about what your goals are for that elderly relative. It definitely has helped me out a lot, and I just think it's such a worthwhile read to help you think through all of that ahead of time. Question 2, what's a book you couldn't give a rat's hiney about? So for this one, I'm gonna say Anything by Sarah J. Maas. I know that Sarah J. Maas is somebody who is really beloved on Booktube, and lots of people really get into her work, but every time I hear a description of one of her books, I just think, no, I'm not interested. I don't like angst, I don't like drama, I don't like love triangles, and it kind of sounds like her books have all of that. It sounds like they're filled with lots and lots of emotional turmoil and love triangles of people being pulled between one thing or another. Even just the plot descriptions of, somebody training to be an assassin, these sorts of things, it's all just such a turn off for me. So I am not ever going to pick up something by Sarah J. Maas. I really, really don't care. Question 3. Given that the holidays are coming up, what's a book you hope someone buys for you? There are so many books that I've read this year that I would love to own copies of, but I think the one that I really have my eye on is Man vs. Durian by Jackie Lau, which is part of her Baldwin Village contemporary romance series. I have a review for the series if you're interested, so I'll link that below. But this book, not only was this a 5-star read for me because I just loved the romance, but the cover is just the best. It is so hilarious. I love that this is a romance novel cover because the guy on it does not match what you're thinking for normal romance covers. You know, there's no six-pack abs here. And the title of the book, Man vs. Durian, it's just so perfect. And I loved the characters too, especially because they don't fall into the typical romance dynamic. You have a guy who's very much just chill, has a job, not looking for more. He's not super powerful. He's not, you know, incredibly handsome, any of these things. He's just a nice guy. And you have a woman who is very, very prickly, very difficult, absolutely loves durian, which the guy doesn't like so much because it's a smelly fruit. And they just have such a great relationship. So this book, its cover and its contents brings me so much joy, so I'd love to own a copy. Question 4. What's a book or series you've given up on? The answer to this is kind of miles long because I DNF like crazy anytime I don't like a book, and very, very frequently I'll start a series and not be interested in continuing. So this is really a hugely long list in reality, but I'm gonna narrow it down and just talk about some of the very popular things that I have DNF'd and really have no interest in. And in particular, one category, which is kind of famous white male SFF authors. So I absolutely adore science fiction and fantasy. It is just, those are kind of my favorite genres. But within this kind of set of genres, you have so many books and series and authors that are considered classics or must read that are just white guys who are so full of themselves. And every time I read their books, it's just filled with political views or sexism or classism or racism or just that male gaze and male privilege that permeates everything that they're writing that I really don't like. I don't want to read that. I don't have time to read that. There's so many other things that I want to be spending my time on. So even though these names are totally beloved within the genre, I'm not into it. So I'm going to tell you a couple of these big white male author names of people who I've tried to read their books and either DNF'd the books or DNF'd the series and just don't have any interest in ever picking up again. So starting with Orson Scott Card. I did read Ender's Game and I liked it, and then I read more about Orson Scott Card and I said absolutely not. Orson Scott Card is somebody who, you know, is very homophobic and has a lot of really extreme political views. I'm not into that. I think he's maybe also very heavily religious. It's just, I don't want to read that. And especially I think in genre fiction, you can have a lot of that bleed into what's going on with the characters. And I just don't want that kind of indoctrination in my reading. Similarly, Terry Goodkind is another author. I read the Sword of Truth series when I was a teenager, and I got to, I think, like book 5, and this is the really controversial one because it was so weirdly political. I remember as a teenager reading it and going, what is this? And I stopped the series at that point. And now as an adult, I read about it, and he is a huge follower of Ayn Rand. And yeah, I don't need all of that kind of politics thrust into these novels, especially, I mean, I guess politics I don't agree with. Next is H.P. Lovecraft, who is somebody who has really influenced a lot of the horror and kind of speculative genre, but man, the guy was not a good person. Just so much of what he wrote was sexist and racist and just really xenophobic, and I just don't like his writing. I remember I tried to read The Dream Quest of Kadath, something like that, and it was just so dull. I was not at all into it, so I don't want to read him, even though I do actually like some of the modern retakes on his work. Those are pretty cool, but not the original guy. Similarly, Stephen King is another huge person in these sort of horror, creepy, speculative fiction type of thing. He's not as bad as some of these other guys that I have written about, but just the white male privilege permeates what he's writing. So I tried to read 11/22/63, I think is the title of it, and that book, I just couldn't get through it because it basically has a guy who time travels back into the 50s, 60s, and he's like, wow, this is amazing. Life was so much better here. And oh yeah, I guess there's racism and sexism, but you know, man, all of the flavors of the soda pop is great. And just that perspective of privilege, and maybe acknowledging that other people don't have it as great, but really reveling in that, I was not here for it. I'm just not interested in reading anything else by him. And similarly, Patrick Rothfuss, who wrote The Name of the Wind, which I got maybe 30% through before I DNF'd. This book, basically the main character, Kvothe, is sort of a little bit of a Gary Stu, just kind of perfect, and so arrogant. I could not stand his arrogance. And this is a series that is totally beloved by so many people, including like my best friend. He absolutely loves this series, and I just could not stand the main character. That privilege and that self-worth, kind of being so full of himself, it was just unbearable to me. And unfortunately, I have heard Patrick Rothfuss speak at a couple of like convention things since then, and he reminds me a lot of that character, very full of himself. And I just don't have time for all of these series and books by these white male authors who really insert themselves and their views so deeply into these stories in a way that I just don't want to read about. Question 5. Who's a character you wish an author would give more time to? I think I would love to hear more about Franca from the short story La Alquimista by N.K. Jemisin in her How Long Till Black Future Month collection. I loved this short story. I do have a discussion video that I did with my friend Wendy at Book Nerd TV, so I'll link that below if you're interested in the collection. But this story was just so fun. It is about a kind of middle-aged woman who's a little bit crotchety and just has no time for anybody's nonsense, who ends up kind of getting this job cooking magical food. The world in this is so cool. I love the main character, and it would just be a really fun thing to have turned into a book or series. And I know that N.K. Jemisin has turned quite a few of her other short stories from this collection into series or books, and so it would be just so cool to have this one created into its own series too. I cannot get enough of really strong-minded middle-aged or older women, and I want more series based on them. Question 6. Who's a character you wish an author would give less time to? So I just recently DNF'd The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova, and the reason why I DNF'd it was because I could not stand some of the characters. In this story, you've got Orquídea, who is a cool character. I loved every scene that was from her perspective, kind of seeing what she was like growing up and even just what her life turned into. But all of the scenes that focused on her relatives, her children and grandchildren, drove me up the wall because those characters were awful. They were so petty and they bickered and they were just bad people. And I just did not want to read about them. And I found myself trying to figure out when the chapters with them would end so that I could get back to Orquídea herself. So if I think Cordova had given less time to these characters, I might have finished the book and who knows, even given it 5 stars because I loved Orquídea's perspective, but those characters I really wish had been given less time. Question 7. If you had to give up almost all your books, which ones would you keep? I think I would keep the Discworld cloth-bound editions that we have. So a couple of years ago, I gave Sush for his birthday a big gift, which was the Discworld kind of Disc Emporium cloth-bound editions. And that is a huge set of rather expensive books, and it's a great series. I actually haven't read all of the Discworld books. I've only read a handful of them. Sush has read more of them, and at some point we do plan to read through all of the books. So I think that that would be a collection to keep, both because it's beautiful and because they're great books that we really want to read through. Question 8. What's the best book or bookish thing you've ever been given? I think the one that really stands out in my mind is the Roosevelt Biography Trilogy by Edmund Morris. Sush gave this to me after I had finished reading the trilogy on ebook and absolutely loved it. And the thing that I was so sad about when I read it on ebook was that there were a ton of footnotes that I hadn't followed the links to, because that is very hard to do when you're reading an ebook. It's just kind of messing up your pages. But later I'd found out that apparently the footnotes are really, really good, and I'd wanted to read that. And so he got me the whole physical trilogy. It's a beautiful collection. I absolutely love this trilogy, and I really want to reread it someday and go through all of the footnotes, and the physical copies will make it really easy to kind of flip back and forth between that. So this made me so happy to get. Question 9. What's a book someone gave you that you wish you could give right back? For this, I have a book that I did give right back, but it was one that was just loaned to me rather than a gift, and that is A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. So about a decade ago, a friend of mine, who is another SFF fan, gave me A Game of Thrones to read because he knew I liked fantasy, and said, hey, this is one of my favorite books, you should try this. And I got maybe 30% through, DNF'd it and said, I do not like this. This was before Game of Thrones was a TV show. I hadn't actually heard of it before. I hadn't even heard of grimdark. And so I was not prepared going into this. I had no idea that grimdark existed. And when I started reading this, I was just aghast. I was not okay when people started being killed off. And I just was not a fan of what George R.R. Martin did to his characters. And this is only, 30% through the first book. So I gave that right back, and I was like, nope, I do not like this. I do not want to read anything more like this. And I still think I stand pretty firm on avoiding grimdark. But yeah, that one I just gave right back. Question 10. Name a time in a book that a character was given something really meaningful. In one of my favorite books from this year, The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez, which I have a review for, so that's linked below, there is such a meaningful gift that is given. So this story follows a captain of a trade spaceship, Nia Amani, and she is kind of a disillusioned person, very much disconnected from the people around her. But she and her crew do a lot of trade missions, and one day they end up finding a very mysterious young boy, and they take him into their fold, and he is nonverbal. He doesn't talk. He's maybe like 10 years old, but he has been through quite a bit of trauma, and he isn't able to talk. And Nia Imani gives him a flute, and he plays the flute, and this is his way of expressing himself. It is a way for him to work through his feelings. It's a way for them to connect. And this flute plays a really important part in their connection and his story. And it's just incredibly beautiful, the way that that unfolds, and the way that Nia Imani is there to make sure that he has that flute and that he has what he needs. And it's such a beautiful gift, so meaningful, and I really, really loved that relationship in the story. It's really lovely. Okay, so those are all of the questions for the tag. I would like to tag a couple of other people in case you guys are interested in doing it, no pressure. Becca at Read Becca, who I also have read a very large short story anthology with and heard a lot of her opinions. She's also got very firm opinions on things. So Becca, if you're interested in doing the tag, I'd love to hear your answers. And Kristen at Kristinelle SFF Reader. Kristen and I discuss things all the time, and it's so fascinating because we have pretty different taste. And so it's really fun to hear Kristen's takes on things because they're often quite different from mine. So Kristen and Becca, if you guys feel like doing this tag, I'd love to hear your answers, but no pressure either way. And anybody else who is interested in doing this tag, go ahead, do it, and let me know that you've done it so I can watch your answers as well. And as a reminder, this tag is uplifting awareness about that charity, the Phoenix Rescue Mission. So all of that is linked below in case you guys want to donate. And if anybody has any responses to my spicy takes in this video, sorry if any of those people were your favorite authors, because I did not like them. But yeah, if you guys have any thoughts, any comments, anything like that, just leave me a comment down below.